hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a very interesting, different, not the typical UFO show tonight with Caroline Cory. She's great. I'm looking forward to talking with her. Before that, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the UFO updates. And as some of you know, especially the members know because it's on the podcast feed, I went to Shag Harbor for the 50th anniversary. And it was a long, long, long drive. So that show is available for members. It's up in the podcast feed. Members only on this one. So if you'd like to subscribe to the show for $2 or more a month, all that information's on Podcast UFO. If you can't and you really want to listen to that, you can watch it as a YouTube video. And that really goes for all of the shows. The unique part of the podcast that goes in for subscribers only is that it goes into media players, and you can listen to it on about anything out there. So anyway, again, our show is with Caroline Cory coming right up, and right now we have Alejandro Rojas. How are you?
Hello. I come in peace.
Yes, I'm glad you do. Yeah. So how's everything going?
You should be glad, because if I didn't,
I know
this planet would be leveled.
That's right.
Leveled.
I saw your killer dog there a few minutes ago.
Oh, yeah. I was just looking for that cute little guy. I was going to give you guys a shot at our cute little dog, but he walked away, it looked like. So he realized I didn't have food and wandered to scavenge elsewhere, I guess.
Yeah, that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on in the UFO world?
So what's going on in UFOs? So you and I covered this story not too long ago of this deputy sheriff from Texas who said he was driving from Texas to Roswell in 1947 and he saw the crashed Roswell saucer. So what he claims, and however, some people looked into his background and they found that he wasn't even a sheriff deputy at that time. He was, I guess, before then and then after 1953. So they were thinking, well, it was probably not until 1953 he actually saw this whatever this crash was. But we do have some more details on this. So this was a witness discovered by Irina Scott, who I believe you've had on the show.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So have I. And it was part of her book, UFOs Today, which was published by Philip Mantle. So she's been working with him on this. Well, they did get a hold of his nephew, who said that this guy is a straight shooter. He's not a liar at all. He's not a kidder. He doesn't really have much of a sense of humor. So if he said whatever he said, it was probably true. Then they were able, through him, to get a hold of the son. And the son said that the nephew, I should add, said he never shared that story with him, so he was not aware of this story of seeing this craft. Then they got a hold of the son. The son says the same thing. My dad was an honest person, so if he said this happened, it happened. And they asked him, well, what about the discrepancies there? And he said, well, maybe he didn't remember everything correctly, dates and times and stuff, but I think it was, Roswell that he saw, the Roswell crash. Although he did admit that he didn't know what he saw at first. So his father didn't leave the scene necessarily thinking that these were extraterrestrials and a crashed flying saucer, which kind of says a lot. He wasn't until later when he was seeing these television shows that he said, oh, that's what I saw. So I don't know. I don't think this is that strong of a case, but there is some more information that Philip posted today that people can take a look at. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah. I do remember it, but also, is it a possibility there was another crash? Like Do I dare say a UFO crash?
I think there's a very real possibility that there was another crash, dare I say, a human aircraft that crashed.
Okay.
So I think that is very, very possible, unfortunately. So, yeah, I just don't feel we have anything strong enough to put him there. And then we also don't have anything strong enough to say for sure it was anything even out of the ordinary. Because if you leave a scene, you know, of a spacecraft crashing, I don't think you're going to be like, I wonder if that was an airplane. You know, you would probably be pretty freaked out.
Yeah,
and not only
burning
that,
your
he
memory.
talks about it being on the side of the road, them allowing him to watch for a period of time, and you know, this crash, if it did happen and it was unusual. Well, we know something crashed, but it didn't crash on the side of the highway. It's deep in the desert. I have been
That's
there,
right.
and not close to any highways.
I think that was the flag that I mentioned that popped up when you first told the story, was that he was saying it was right near the highway. And there's no case at all, you know, when it comes to Roswell, that, you know, the two supposed crash sites had nothing to do with the highway.
Yeah. Well, and Irina's talked to this guy. I'm not sure if Philip has, but they've got a video of him before he passed. He's passed away. And, you know, it sounds like by all accounts he's an honest person, I think. But an honest person, especially once they've gotten older, can make a mistake.
Yeah.
I make them all the time.
Right, right. And, you know, there's a lot of
You're
talk
agreeing
about...
with me that I make a lot of mistakes. Thanks.
No, but there is a lot of talk about memory, of how memory can change, and like your total memory can change about what you remember. That's why it's so important, if you see something really unusual, to document it right away.
Exactly. Memory is very fallible and malleable. So there's plenty, especially lately, of studies that have gone on where it shows that people's memories are completely manipulated. It's very easy to ask someone about something that happened and their memories. And we know this from talking with family, you know, your parents' story about how you tripped, you know, in front of your kindergarten class and cried and ran out of the room or whatever, you know, gets exaggerated and exaggerated more and more. All of these stories get exaggerated, and people are prone to do that. And then these memories are created. So, yeah, memory is a very fallible thing. They find that out more and more. So,
well, someone just said they don't believe you make any mistakes in the chat room. You know, and I'm surprised that no one in the chat room has talked about your Denver Broncos shirt yet.
Me making mistakes is rare, despite what my girlfriend says. You know why? And she pointed this out earlier, is because if I make a mistake, I blame it on her. So it was actually her fault, not mine. So that's why I don't make mistakes.
All right.
But yeah, Denver Broncos, they're pretty cool. My hometown. But, and this is the old school. When I grew up, this was their logo. Anyway, other news. So more Roswell news, and this has to do with the alien autopsy. So I think we might have talked about this a bit last week, but to summarize, there was an interview with a guy named Spyros Malaris, and this was kind of the first time he came forward, and it was in a UK paper about a week ago, where he said, I'm the guy who made the famous Alien Autopsy film. I'm the one who got all the 40s style stuff. And he told the story about how he did all of this. It was a fairly short story. Well, not to be outdone, a couple days later, Ray Santilli, who is the most well-known person attached to this film, he's the guy who paid for it to get made and everything. He came forward and said, no, Malaris is wrong. Sure, it is a hoax video. I've admitted that we hoaxed it, but it was based off of this film that was real. Meantime, Philip Mantle, who we talked about just a second ago, is probably the one who's investigated this the most. He's broken a lot of these stories. He's talking to Malaris before, and John Humphreys, the special effects guy who actually designed the alien. And he posted at openminds.tv a summary of his full investigation. And Malaris is very clear, so is Humphreys. We did not see any allegedly real film. We made this alien up from our own imaginations. In fact, Ray Santilli had shown them what he said was film of the original film he was provided. And Malaris quickly said that was shot with video. and Santilli got embarrassed, and they kind of broke apart. And then Malaris said, "Hey, that wasn't real, but it would be fun to make a real one and see what happens. We'll make a documentary about how, we have this real footage, and then we'll make a follow-up documentary about how we faked it all and we tricked everybody." Well, they did that. They created the alien and everything. Then they brought Santilli in and said, "Hey, look, we've created this film that looks real. Why don't we go out and shop this around?" So they eventually got a hold of this filmmaker, Bob Kvyat. And the film was shot. They made millions of dollars, huge success. But of course, at that time, Ray Santilli wanted to continue to push the story that it was not fake. People did discover that the original video was fake or film was fake, and then they tried to pretend that, he had a piece that was real. And then a movie was made starring a couple comedians in the UK. They showed a little part of this film that was allegedly real. Santilli, again, tried to pretend it was real, but as Humphreys and others and Malaris have said, no, that was all made up. We made that up for the film as well, the movie with the comedians about all of this. Well, Ray Santilli decides to talk to The Sun and do an interview. And he says, I think I mentioned this before, Malaris is completely wrong. Well, he said, here's a little piece of the real film. Here's a image of the real film that he provided The Sun. The Daily Express. The Daily Express posted this image, and very quickly, his name is Scott Brando. He runs a site, UFO of Interest. He tweeted me and he said, "Look, that isn't part of any original film. All he did was take a clip from the hoax video, and he made it a negative, and then he manipulated it with Photoshop to make it look old." And sure enough, he shows them right next to each other, and that's exactly what he did. The Daily Express read our story on this, and so they got their own expert who confirmed, yeah, this is just a Photoshop of a clip from the footage that he has already admitted to have hoaxing. So Santilli's got some more funny business going on here. So Daily Express tried to confront him, and he just won't answer them. He said, at one point, he was too busy. One time he said he was driving. They emailed him and said, hey, that you tried to trick us on this. And his reply was 1947. They assume it means it was in response. But he's written about this on the Daily Express, and we have this up at openminds.tv. But essentially it all comes around again at the silly Santilli guy, Freudian slip there when I called him silly guy, but is not to be trusted, that he's a tricky guy and just not to be trusted.
Yeah,
so
I'll go on the record as calling him a slime ball.
He is a slime ball. I agree with that. So, Malaris, and this is really cool, in our story, Mantle even included some pictures and drawings that Malaris made when they were conceiving of the alien. So you can see these drawings where he's pointing out, we need to make this look like this. We need to make this look like that. Just so he could prove that, this came from our own imaginations. This did not come from any alleged real photos from 1947. And I think he makes a great case. I think that for me, the autopsy thing was already put to bed, but I think the case for the autopsy being a complete hoax is very strong, especially when the people involved are claiming that also. And he even talks about how he could have gone on with Santilli and they could have made more money together if they would have continued to call it real, but they didn't. I think that's telling.
Yes.
A couple other short things.
Wait a minute, before we go there, I just want to say we got Jordan Bonaparte, who I did the show at Shag Harbor with. He's in the chat room, and he says hi, and he says you have some damn nice hair.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, nice thick hair. I'm pretty jealous. Not too much.
Really?
Yeah,
look how gray it is. It gets more and more white all the time. And well, that's very nice to hear because my hair does whatever it wants. And luckily, I'm lucky right now that it's wanting to look nice.
Yeah.
But a couple other things, stories that that are pretty cool, I think, that have been in the news. Well, I don't know. With this first one, it is the Roswell Slides, the infamous Roswell Slides, which you and I have talked at length about, which were, of course, a couple years ago, these slides of a mummy that Jaime Maussan, believe it or not, tried to purport were alien. But he wasn't alone. He put on this event. Richard Dolan was there and was kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. But the main researchers were Don Schmidt and Tom Carey. And they didn't do very good research because the day after they released a full-on photo, a full-resolution photo, people found out that there's a placard in there that said this isn't just a mummy. So Jaime, of course, is denying that it's a mummy. He still says it's an alien, which is absolutely ridiculous because we know all about this mummy, where it comes from, the whole history and everything at this point. But in this story, it was written by The Guardian, which is another UK paper, but this is not a tabloid. This is probably the most respected paper they have over there. But for some reason, they decided to write on this whole escapade. They took it from the perspective mostly of the people who were involved, like Adam Dew, someone I had talked to who was representing the owner of the film, and then Tom and Don. And Tom and Don admit we wanted to believe too badly and we overlooked some information we shouldn't have. But Tom and Don are saying Adam Dew and the film owners, however, did trick us. They didn't give us all the information. Adam Dew is saying, well, no, we did give them the information. We did feel they were kind of taking it a little far, but we didn't know. We're just going with the flow to see what would happen. And I got that sentiment when I had talked to him. I think he was pretty committed to it being something strange because they thought it was when they looked at it. That's why they sought help from experts, quote unquote. But, it just went bad. So this story is really interesting. It tells the whole story, a couple different things that are added to it. But one good thing, even Don Schmidt said, was that the media had not caught on this whole thing. And so they were happy that it didn't become a big media thing. And then, of course, eventually, 2 years later, now The Guardian has written about it. That doesn't seem to have really caught on much, though.
That's good.
Yeah, which is good because it just needs to go away.
Right.
And then finally, The Atlantic. This is a cool story. Speaking of Jaime taking mummies and calling them aliens, well, Gaia, which unfortunately is not very careful with their research. In fact, I think their research is awful. It's almost like they like to get hoaxes and call them real, which is unfortunate. But and Jaime does that as well. So I guess they make a good team. But they're trying to purport that these mummies found in the deserts out in like Chile are aliens. Well, no, they're not. And as we know, this keeps happening. People keep bringing forth these bodies and then purporting them to be alien, and they turn out not to be because that desert, just the bodies are mummified and they stay in a more intact state longer than other places. Well, The Atlantic wrote a big long story about this titled "The Racism Behind Alien Mummy Hoaxes," of which it is a genre. I mean, now that's a thing, I think, after we've had so many of them and we'll continue to have more of these alien mummy hoaxes going on. The Atlanta wrote a story about it and just about how the locals are upset that, people keep digging up their ancestors and calling them aliens, which I could see how that would be offensive.
Yeah, I'm really glad they wrote that story. And hopefully that'll stop. It's not right.
It's not right, man.
Yeah. Well, is that all you got this week? Which is quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, it was. I know you're like, is that all?
Yeah, I know.
That was quite a bit, man.
All right. Hey, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Have fun with your interview. Caroline's a lot of fun. I had fun talking with her before. And, of course, all these stories can be found at openminds.tv.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you.
All right.
See ya.
Bye-bye. All right. So our guest coming up, and I think I just hung up on her. Yeah, I did. All right. So our guest coming up is Caroline Cory, and she is a filmmaker, futurist, international speaker, and a visionary author of best-selling books on consciousness and quantum healing. and a very interesting woman, and really happy to have her on board. Hi, Caroline. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Just make sure you turn your camera on, if you would. All right. So there you are.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, everyone. And so anyway, thank you for joining us. And so can you give the audience, the listening audience, your background, if you would, please?
Yeah, it's funny, I was listening to you chatting with Alejandro, and my background is so different. It's like I had nothing to do almost with the whole UFO, ufology, if you will. So my background is with interaction with the beings. So that's how it started out for me. I was 5 years old, and that's the first time that I came in contact with the beings. They just showed up, and we started talking, and so that was my background, in the sense that it was a direct and real experience. It wasn't, did I see something in the sky or not, And so this experience was so real. I remember everything about it. We were communicating telepathically. I remember how that happened, who the beings were. But what happened was, since that time, I started questioning, how did it happen? How did they get here? And so because of that, I started to get into consciousness and the mechanics of the universe and that sort of thing. So that's the reason why I ended up developing methodology for consciousness and healing and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Now, so would you say basically that you would consider yourself an experiencer, or had you had what people are calling an abduction?
No, it wasn't an abduction, because I was never taken by force on a spaceship like that. So I was an experience. I mean, if you call an experiencer someone who's been on a ship or abducted, then I'm not an experiencer. But if an experiencer is someone who came in contact with any non-human entity, then I am an experiencer. So it depends how you define it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Now, did you talk about this, what was happening, to, say, your friends or your family or anything, or anyone?
Yeah, I actually didn't. It was very spontaneous. I was very young when when it happened. And like I said, it was just kind of natural for me, but I was more into internalizing the process, like what just happened and how could that happen? And so I never really talked about it. I kept it to myself. And that's probably a good thing, because I think if I start talking about it, then people would be like, parents would be saying, that's not real, don't go there. You know what I mean? So I didn't really share too much.
Uh-huh. And so how would you say this, well, you basically already told us, but what are some other ways that this changed your life?
Well, I mean, this has been my life. Like throughout my life, I've been communicating with different beings and different consciousness. And so this has been my life. So, I want to say that it didn't really, I didn't realize that it was changing my life. It was just kind of shaping my life in a way that kept me going into wanting to understand how it all worked, who the beings were, how many different types of beings were there, is everybody seeing what I was seeing, that sort of stuff. So it kind of shaped my life in a certain way.
And I guess I'm going to ask you, how long did it take before you actually talked to someone that had a similar experience?
So that was much, much, much later, when when I was an adult and I realized that this was not so common, or at least people do not want to talk about it. So for me, it was normal. so it took me a long time, and by the time I started teaching and speaking about it, and I wrote books, of course, then it was more recent actually that people were, kind of sharing their experiences. They were telling me what was going on with them, and so then I started to kind of put it in perspective. Okay, these guys are seeing grays and reptilians and stuff, but that's not what I was seeing. So how does that all work? And how are they all kind of all connected, in the universe? And who comes here to do what? So by people sharing their experiences with me, I kind of put it all together, if you will. And I started to then talk about my experiences because I realized they were quite unique, and it was adding more information to what was already out there.
Now, where did you grow up?
When I was very young, I grew up in France, but really I spent most of my life, in the U.S. But I also traveled a lot. I lived a lot in Japan, and just a little bit all over. But most of my life, of course, in the U.S., in Florida. Yeah.
The reason I asked, besides I could detect a little tiny nice accent, but the reason I asked basically is because it seems like the U.S. has a concentration of people claiming they're having some type of experience, and I don't know why that is, but it just seems like I talk to people all over the world as far as this show goes, and it seems like there's a lot more going on here. Not saying that things don't happen elsewhere, but at least people talk about it here.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say, is that I don't know if it only happens here, but I think more people talk about it here, because I guess it's more open and it's okay, and there's a lot more restrictions, I think, in different cultures and countries, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, for sure. I mean, were you able to watch some of the film?
Yes, I did watch it, and I do want to talk quite a bit about that as we go along. And it was really very, very well done, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So when you were young, someone wanted to know in the chat room, they wanted to know more details about what you actually, experienced.
So what happened was I was 5 years old, and I was just hanging out there. I was in the living room with my parents. It was actually Christmas Eve, which was kind of interesting. And so everybody was busy with like Christmas trees or whatever. And all of a sudden I see this kind of ball of energy. It was just like a ball of light, and it was standing right next to me. So I looked around and I was like, anybody else can see that? And of course nobody was paying attention. So right away a telepathic communication started to happen. So I could hear what they were saying super clear. And I could also see, because I could see subtle energy. I mean, obviously I didn't know at age 5 what subtle energy was, but it just kind of spontaneously happened. I could see like kind of the fabric of space, if you will, between me and this consciousness kind of merge. And I could see how the information was traveling from them into my brain and vice versa. So that's kind of how it started. And then they said, we are now communicating telepathically. And they said the way you do this is you actually condense an entire concept, like you crunch it together. And then they showed me like some sort of symbols. So instead of speaking, like for hours and hours, you just kind of transfer a symbol, and that symbol equals a whole conversation. It's like a zip drive, So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I've talked to a number of people that have claimed that they've had some type of communication, and so I've asked them about language. I think recently I had a guest on, and I said, "What language did it speak in, or what language did you hear it in?" and it's always their home language. But if it's
Yeah.
coming, if it's a one size fits all, and code or whatever it is you're talking about, in
Yes.
your film, I think you said that it's something that's activated within the brain that can communicate.
Yeah. So what happens is that this zip drive, so to speak, is a universal language. It's kind of like it's like the human brain is trained to learn a human language. So when you're a kid, your parents are speaking to you in English, so you're learning the English language, and you're storing these words in your in your brain, not in your physical brain, and then you are retrieving what you've learned to speak. So it's kind of like you're learning the vocabulary and everything in your human brain. But then you are a consciousness, you are a universal consciousness. You didn't come in this physical body from the beginning. You are a universal, you're connected to the universal fabric. And that connection is all consciousness, and there is spontaneous communication. And so this happens in the form of codes. It's literally like a code. And then when you download this code, it opens into your own computer system, if you will, in the language that you understand. So it's not like they're speaking English or they're speaking French. It doesn't work this way. You know what I mean?
Right. I actually...
This common denominator is a coded language. And your brain is the one that's translating it into what you understand.
I think it's in 2 weeks from now. I have Randy Nickerson, who I've become friends with over the years. He is doing a film on the Ariel school incident. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But there were witnesses, and they were school kids at the time in South Africa, and they talked about communication, and a lot of them were images. They saw images of possible destruction of the earth, but anyway, the short story is that one of the witnesses is going to be on this show in just 2 weeks, along with and I am going to ask what type of communication, if any, did that particular witness feel as though they had.
Yeah, and actually, this is where sometimes things get misinterpreted, because sometimes that coded language, it comes in images as well. And so this is where the human brain kicks in and starts to interpret those images. And depending on what the person, like their preconceived ideas or fears or what have you, this is where the mix-up starts to happen, and where, you are receiving the download, but then your human is also mixing in stuff that wasn't there. That's the problem.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
There's different people now that have been in the field a long time that have been talking about downloads. For instance, Grant Cameron, which he used to just talk about, the presidents in regards to UFOs. He's talking about this lately, and David Jacobs, who I know is in your film,
right,
speaks about it. So let's talk a little bit about your film in general. You have a lot of science people, and a person that I've been in touch with before, I'm trying to remember, from Stanford that does DNA. Who am I thinking of?
Glenn Ryan.
What is it?
Glenn Ryan.
No, someone.
The DNA.
Dolan?
Gary Nolan.
Nolan, that's it.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Yeah, he's the one that did this whole DNA sequencing on that skeleton, actually. Right. So it was interesting. At least we knew he was open to, getting involved in these sort of topics. So we spoke to him about this film. So what I wanted to do, like I said, so for me, my background was not just seeing UFOs in the sky, because I had very, very direct contact experiences with beings, and also not just that, kind of understanding the mechanics of all of it. I wanted to bring the science of that mechanics to the world, So that's the reason why I wanted to interview scientists in the film. He's one of them. But I also wanted to interview, in the film you have astrophysicists, you have quantum biologists. So I wanted to approach it from different angles, all from a scientific perspective, to bring validation to this whole contact phenomenon. I mean, I think you know how it is seen from the outside. It's not taken seriously.
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, it is a little bit because of what you and Alejandro were discussing. You know, some people are making things up and, you know, mixing it with the real deal. So that's what happens. And so I wanted to kind of stick to what I really, really know is real, because it happened to me and so many other people, and just bring that science to show it. And I think I did in the film, because we ended up doing on-camera experiments and to show how it was actually possible to come in contact with a non-physical entity. And I don't know, did you get to that part in the film?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So what did you think?
You know, I think I try to be open-minded. I try to be skeptical at the same time, and
Sure.
And I try to be open-minded because I understand that as I'm going along, I haven't really heard any concrete answers to what is happening. And there's so much more than just the UFO field, which I focus on in this show, basically. But
Right.
there's so many more things that are unexplainable. And, you know, I do believe that there is a type of like energy connection and between us all and you know, I mean, it fascinates me, that whole topic. And
There's definitely, sorry, go ahead.
no. And then also, I know that you talk about, there's all kinds of theories and thoughts about how UFOs get here, for instance.
Right.
And so I'm always open to hear, I heard you talk about it, and I'm always open to hear different sides. So you're welcome to talk about that as well.
Yeah. So that was another thing. Like I said, one of the questions I had was, well, how did these beings get here? They just like show up, and it was, you know, one of the most intriguing question as I was talking to them. I was like, but you know, how did that happen? And how are they here physically, or is this a projection, or how does that work? And so, you know, with time, I discovered, and I also could perceive, because I could perceive the cell energy, like I said, I could see that it's not just a kind of an invisible and abstract energetic link. The actual fabric of space itself, so the space between you and me, even if you're physically here in the room, is not obviously empty. Scientists have been saying that, but it's actually made of specific geometric patterns. So it's kind of like a cobweb. It's very, very interesting, but it's very specific. And so this kind of geometric pattern, this hologram, literally connects you and me and everybody else in the room. And of course, it doesn't stop there. It continues around the planet and in the whole cosmos. And so that specific web, it allows, I mean, it's not just one web, it's one web within a web within a web. It's a bit more complex, but it's made in such a way that certain intersections of this web are what we call black holes. So there's big black holes, and there's smaller black holes, and then mini black holes. And what happens is that when you are at a black hole point, you are pretty much in resonance with all of the black holes within this structure. This is, again, laws of physics and quantum mechanics. But these are even just the law of resonance, which is not so, I mean, this is very much validated already, and it's out there. Because you are at a specific point in space that is kind of equivalent or similar to another, it's whatever information is in one place is also in the other. And so you could be somewhere at a black hole or at this intersection point that I call within this cosmic web, And if you are at one particular black hole, you are pretty much at all the black hole all at once. So if I'm somewhere, let's say on Mars or on a bigger cosmic level, and there's this perfectly organized web structure, and I am at a particular intersection within this cosmic web, at this particular black hole, I can instantaneously appear at another black hole here on the Earth. So it's not propulsion. You're not kind of like, breaking through the barrier of sounds and all that stuff. It's instantaneous, and that's how it works. And it makes a lot more sense anyway than the science that's out there. Do you agree?
I think it's interesting. It's hard for me to agree to any of it because without really, knowing. But it's an interesting concept. And one of the questions I thought, was it hard for you to get people of science involved in a movie like this?
Actually, I was looking for, of course, scientists who of a certain credibility and caliber, I want to say, because there are a lot of scientists out there who are doing all sorts of stuff in their garage. Not to diminish what they're doing, because that's how you discover amazing things too. But what I'm saying is, for the purpose of this film, because I was trying to bring credibility, I wanted to get those guys. And surprisingly, I was able to, the top scientist, one of the top scientists, a Harvard Smithsonian astrophysicist. I mean, how much more credibility do you need, right?
Was he the one that was talking about the black hole?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? There's questions in the chat room about that.
Yeah, and so he's the one who was able to validate what I just mentioned to you. And he's one of the first people who actually, not the first, but more recently, I want to say, that showed that black holes had a strong magnetic field. And so so that's his word. In fact, he's a black hole expert, so to speak, in astrophysics. And so what he's done is that he was able to demonstrate that this magnetism on the surface of the black hole is what allows information to be stored, to be trapped within the fabric of space. So everything that we're doing right now, so when we are speaking, we are projecting ideas or whatever we are actually doing is being stored literally within the fabric of space. And this magnetism, is the one that allows all of the different black holes to communicate with each other. And, so the information travels through quantum waves from one black hole to another instantaneously because of the magnetic force of the black holes. So it's kind of like you have a magnet here, a magnet there, and all of the magnets are kind of sharing the same information. You have the quantum waves going through the magnets all at once. You see what I mean? That's how he explained it.
Can you repeat, someone wanted to know in the chat room, can you repeat the name of the astrophysicist from Harvard? What was his name?
Yeah, Dr. Rudy Shield.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know that name actually. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so he was able to, to demonstrate how the waves, the quantum waves that are, propagating through space are trapping this information, are storing information, and then you can literally use this magnetized property of the black holes to kind of be everywhere at once and transport yourself from one point to another, thanks to this black hole magnetism. So,
wow.
Yeah,
that's something. So back to the question. You wanted to get people of a certain magnitude. Was it difficult to get people to commit to this type of movie?
So he was one of my first one that I really wanted to have, because he was his specialty was black holes, and me, like I mentioned, my background was more consciousness and understanding the mechanics of consciousness. But at a very young age, I also understood that the role of black holes is not just so that stars go in and explode and disappear. Black holes are also kind of a central point. One of the things is that they hold matter together, and matter and the physical universe starts with a black hole, through a black hole. So anyway, long story short, I knew that the role of the black holes was extremely important for consciousness, understanding consciousness, but also communication, teleportation. I mean, I understood that role, the role they had. So I wanted an astrophysicist who really worked on that. And so I had my eye on him. I couldn't reach him for a long time. And so I don't know what he was doing. And somebody introduced me to him. And then I didn't hear for like 6 months. And then all of a sudden, I sent him an email. I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is my background. And he wrote me right back. He said, I'm in.
Wow.
And so, so that was him. Gary Nolan, same thing. We told him what we were doing, and he said, fine. Glenn Ryan, who did the experiment on the human DNA, which we probably should talk about a little bit. He when I told him what I was doing also, it was a no-brainer. Right away, he sent me all of the papers he had written, what was relevant. We discussed what kind of experiments we could do together, and he was in. So actually, it wasn't that difficult now that I think of it. But also probably because I was looking for the right type of scientists who were open to this sort of information. Otherwise,
Yeah, it can be tough. Now, you just said you study consciousness, and from what I understand, that there's never been, that's a real debatable topic, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, which I'm really surprised about, because everything is about consciousness. And like I said, for me, it was experiential. It wasn't somebody told me it's this way or that way. It just happened. And so, at the age of 5, and at the time, there's no internet. There's no, you don't go and kind of familiarize with yourself with the topic and gather other people's input. You're just a child, you know what I mean? And then for this information to just happen so organically, and for you to open yourself up to the mechanics of the entire universe, I mean, there's a lot more that science hasn't caught up with. I mean, and it's all about consciousness,
Yeah. No, I think science is more about discovery than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things to discover. Things are already here, already happening, and it's just discovering exactly what it is.
Right. And also, it's all measurable. It's about measuring the observable, where a lot of it is not observable. A lot of it, you know what I mean? So and we know it's there because the sound waves you don't see, but we know they're there. Gamma rays you don't see, but then no gamma rays you see, but you know what I mean? So they know that there are frequencies that you cannot observe with the naked eye, but you can measure with certain instrument. But still, the fact that they're not observable or measurable, through the physical spectrum doesn't mean they're not there. And so why couldn't there be more that they cannot measure, they cannot see and observe quite yet,
Right. I had someone on the show that was talking about the brains, like membranes, the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
Does that come into play anywhere in any of your research or looking into this?
Yeah, actually, I wrote about this. I wrote 3 books, and because, like I said, that was my background, and so I did the consciousness work first before started making films, and so the biggest discovery, if you will, or what I was really working on, and I realized that that's what I was here to do, was to understand the mechanics of how things work, but also the bigger context. In other words, how does Earth fit within a galaxy, within a within a universe, within a multiverse, within a multiverse? And then so I was kind of like, how should I say? I was remembering, I want to say, because I also could, part of this understanding was the remembrance of my own coming here, so to speak. Like how did I get here, and how does that fit into this body, and how do I communicate with my higher consciousness? How does all this work? So with that unfolding and this questioning, I was able to kind of map out, if you will, a multiverse structuring, patterning, so to speak. And it's all in my book. So that was like 15 years ago. So I did that for a while. People can go and, read it in the books and my classes and stuff.
Oh, okay. We had some people send in some questions on the forum, and so I will occasionally read one to you. This one's from Kerry. He asks, do you think we are being interacted with in multiple ways, but are governed by what we can perceive by our consciousness and physical senses? It keeps going here. If so, do you think this is ETs from another planet or some form of intelligence that we don't understand?
Well, it's everything. So I like this question because it touches on so many different things. First of all, from the beginning, when you come in as a human, you didn't show up in this body. And where did this body come from in the first place? Of course, there's the mother and the father. Yeah. But there is the consciousness that existed prior to this physical form. And so where did this consciousness come from? So your parents didn't make your consciousness. There's something bigger than that. So just to simplify it, let's say that you are pure consciousness somewhere in the universe. Let's say you were kind of initiated or created as consciousness, let's say at the Pleiades, okay, just to simplify. So that consciousness exists at the Pleiades. But then when you are at the Pleiades and you say, oh, look at this planet down there, planet Earth, I think I'm going to go and be a human for a while. So you bring parts of your consciousness and you arrive, and that part of your consciousness is able to take on a human form. So when your parents make up the baby shape, that aspect of your consciousness occupies, takes over, if you will, that baby shape, and part of you becomes a human. But the original consciousness has never ceased to exist. So this is one answer to your question. Part of the communication that never ceases to exist is between you as a human and your higher consciousness. So that higher consciousness, which is yourself somewhere else, this connection has never been severed. So it is continuously guiding you, giving you information, telling you what you're here to do, reminding you of, what you're about, and so on and so forth. But the little one that's you is now bombarded with, your parents' things and peer pressure and what society's telling you to do, and so on and so forth. So the human aspect of you is now creating blocks and fears. So when you are receiving information from your higher consciousness, your fears are kicking in, your confusion is kicking in, and you think you are separated. You think you're all alone, and you think you're not being guided, and you don't know why you're here, and so on and so forth. So this is when you have other entities, you see, where there are other beings that also exist within this earth plane that are now trying to help or distract. So you see how now all of a sudden you have your higher consciousness that's supposed to be helping, but then you're confused, you're pushing it away. You have other beings telling you what to do, but you don't know who's talking to it, so on and so forth. So you see how it becomes kind of confusing. So we are influenced by all sorts of stuff and beings and consciousness all connecting together.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. Earlier, when we were first talking before the show, you talked about your little Laja Apso, and I talked about my Chihuahua. I'm a dog lover. So are you. So how do animals? They don't have the intelligence that we have. How do they fit into this whole thought of what you're talking about?
So for me, animals are created usually to support the consciousness of a planet. So their chemistry and their electrical system are made to kind of recycle a lot of the information that the Earth needs. That's why they're usually on 4 legs, because they, bring in the information from the Earth and out through the Earth. Or if they're flying like birds, and they're working with the magnetic field of the planet. So the animals are part of the planetary consciousness, part of its mechanics, if you will. That's how they fit in. But of course, they can pick up human stuff too, energetic stuff, just like you saw in the film, what we did with the human DNA.
Someone wanted to know in the chat room if there's any evidence that all of what we're seeing is a simulation. I've heard of that theory.
Yeah. I thought about that many, many times, but there's too much evidence that it is not a simulation, because you can change certain things. If it's a simulation, you would think that certain things could not be changed at will. So I've had very strong and very real experiences where I could change literally some things within, the physical reality, if you will. So if I have that much control, then how could it be you know what I mean? So I'm kind of overriding the program. Mm-hmm. You see?
Yeah, I get that. So Bill wanted to know, he sent this question in. You have had experiments performed to demonstrate the relationship between intent or consciousness and remotely affecting DNA. I do want to talk about that, to investigate the healing properties of consciousness. What experiments have you done, and what were the results? Did you also do experiments to rule out the observed effects when coming from something other than intent? So that was part of your film. So go ahead and talk about that if you would.
Yeah, exactly. So what I wanted to do is demonstrate that it is possible to come in contact with a non-visible entity. And so, because like I said, that's what happened to me many, many times. And so I spoke with Dr. Ryan, and I said, why don't we design an experiment where because there have been many experiments and research and articles written on people measuring the intent on water. I mean, so there's nothing new there. But what we wanted to do is, because we were talking about ETs and entities and spirits and stuff like that, I said, well, instead of just demonstrating healing ability and changing the water structure, can we bring an actual consciousness, a spirit entity? And he said, this has never been done before. I said, well, that's the point. Let's see what happens. And so we designed the experiment. He's working with DNA, which was kind of also very interesting. And he has DNA from placenta, from female placenta, which is perfect. And so what he would do is he would measure it as a science experiment. You have to measure it over and over and over and as a control, and then do the experiment again 10 times to make sure it wasn't a fluke. So what he did is, first he measured the conductivity of the placenta, the DNA, and he also measured the frequencies. And what I did was we kind of looked at it and did nothing, that was a control. And then I brought in a I invoked at the time it was an archangel, like Archangel Michael. And so we brought in this energy, and exactly at that time, the DNA started to register crazy, effects. And so, long story short, we did that over and over. And as a scientific experiment, you do on and off and on and off, so to make sure it's correlated properly. And eventually, we saw very strong correlation with the times that, I was bringing this consciousness to the DNA, and it basically shot up 400%. Its conductivity shot up 400%, which was very, very significant. That's one of the results, and we did other ones.
Yeah, I know the scientist there seemed like he was a little bit shocked about that.
He was very shocked. He was like, wow. And because it was also very fast. I mean, I invoked the energy in like few seconds. It was like, so he was very, very shocked. But we also had another result that was even more shocking. And I don't want to give away the whole film because it's kind of fun to discover as you're watching the film. But basically, he also did another measuring, which had to do with frequency, which was interesting as well. And after the contact, when we brought in this consciousness, the frequencies also changed, but I'm not going to say how, but it was very significant. And it was, he was like, this could not have happened. This does not even make logical sense. So, and again, we did it scientifically. We did over and over and over. So these are the types of things that I did with the DNA, and it's pretty. Think about it. What we were able to demonstrate was that a non-physical entity was literally changing the DNA. So that's pretty huge, So the other experiments that were done with the intent and the healing were doing one thing, but here we're measuring human DNA literally change just through, the present. Well, okay, so then in the film, people may say, well, is it my intent or is it the presence of the being? And we did other experiments, and we continue, by the way, after the film to do more experiments. But even if just people who watch just the film see whether it's me or the entity, the fact that I wasn't even touching the DNA, you know what I mean? So how did that transfer happen? Exactly at that time. So, but we are doing additional experiments. Now we're designing a whole set of experiments, on the same basis to show, what the difference between me and my intent affected the DNA versus an actual entity, and which entity, and then other entities. So it's really, really exciting.
Okay. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Can you let the listener know where they can actually see this film? I looked at the screening version. Can someone actually rent it at this point?
Yeah, it's going to be out in just a few days, like October 10th, so just in a couple of days. And people can go to the website et-contact.com, et-contact.com, and then go to watch the film, and they'll see all the information there.
Okay, is it going to be on like Amazon or anything like that? Do you know?
Yeah, it's going to be on all the platforms, so people can just choose and decide what they like.
Okay, so while we're on the topic of the DNA, how controlled was the environment that the DNA was stored between experiments and all that? Was that really regulated?
Yeah, again, so we did the control. Like I said, you do it over and over and over in the same environment, the same kind of conditions. That's the point. And these were the results. So, that's what happened. And I did another experiment also that it's not in the film, but like I said, after we did all these experiments with these scientists, it was so exciting that after the filming, we were like, oh, we need to do more. This is really, really interesting. So I did another experiment with Dr. Rubik, Beverly Rubik, and Harry Jabs. They worked together. And what they did was measure the biophoton emission of healers, for example, as they were coming in contact with their spirit guides or what have you, and seeing the difference. So I did another experiment with them where it was a long distance. It was a remote contact. They were in San Francisco and I was in Los Angeles. And we did the same thing. We did the control for, I don't know, 3 hours or something. So we measured the space for a long period of time. And then I came in and I specifically kind of invoked an energy for, I think it was 10 minutes or 20 minutes. I'm not sure. But for 20 minutes or that time. And then they registered, like the machines were all like registering crazy stuff. And then it was like nothing the next 20 minutes. And then when I would do it again, the next 20 minutes, the machines were. So that's how scientifically they do it. It means they try to find a correlation on and off, on and off. When you're on, they try to find the correlation with their machine, if their machines are reacting or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, sure. Let's see. I wanted to ask a question that came up. As far as the ETs, where do you think they come from? That's on the in the chat room.
Well, there's different ones that come. I mean, there's hundreds of ETs. I mean, they're coming from everywhere for different reasons. Some of them come in to incarnate in human form. Some of them are here to simply interact from, again, through the black holes, through what I call intradimensionally, like through the dimensions. So they're speaking to us telepathically or downloading information or that sort of interaction. And so they come in within our Earth space, but they're not physically here. So there's tons of those, tons. And they're coming from everywhere within this planetary system and doing all sorts of downloads and healing and teaching and things like that. But there are also, at this particular time, there are very specific types of beings that are coming from very far away in the universe, and in fact, a couple from other universes. And this is very unusual on a small planet like that. So, and the reason being is because the Earth is, just look around, needs a little bit of help, right? And so, so there are specific types of beings that normally don't come to this type of planets, normally don't come that close to a material life form because they cannot exist. I mean, their composition doesn't allow them to survive, if you will. So there's those types of beings that are, some of them are incarnating. Again, that's very, very unusual. And some of them are just here kind of supervising what else is going on. These are, the guys that we want to connect with, because these are the beings that are coming from a much bigger, larger consciousness mass. And so they are bringing with them the bigger story, if you will, that is helping the Earth kind of move in a particular direction. Whereas the other ones that are close from Mars or the moon or whatever, they're just kind of manipulating or moving things right and left on a very local, small level.
I've mentioned this before in a few different shows that, if it's possible that there's so much intelligent life out there, and these are all, theories, but the possibility of, say, billions and billions of planets out there that could have intelligent life. I mean, that is possible. Then why would we be so special that we'd be, visited and try to, stop us destroying our planet or whatever it is? Why would we be that special?
Yeah, it's an important question, and it's a big question because it's a long question too, because of the history of what happened on the Earth, and it's not just the Earth; it's more the planetary system. So what happened is that when this planetary system was created, and also eventually when the Earth was created, it was created slightly differently than other planetary systems. It was interfered with during its creation, or I want to say at least, originally a little bit earlier, but definitely from about 200,000 years ago, there has been a lot of interference and manipulation and stuff like that that interfered with the natural evolution of this planet. But the reason why you're saying, why are we being visited and we're so special? I mean, the Earth is so special. It is because when it was created, the way it was created was slightly different. It kind of, if you can imagine that the Earth and this planetary system is at the edge of the universe, and every planetary system and every planet kind of stays connected to a core of a galaxy, if you will. So it's kind of like the planets connect to the galaxy connects to a cluster of galaxy, the clusters of galaxy connect to the center of the universe. It's kind of like a little Russian doll effect. Well, what happened with this planetary system is that it has a very unique connection that goes, let's call it an umbilical cord. That umbilical cord connects directly to the universal core. So, which means that, again, I'm simplifying, and I'm kind of trying to answer the question in a way that makes sense. Why this is so? Whatever happens on this planetary system, on this planet, is almost like a direct connection to the entire universe. So it was kind of an experiment, and because it was done this way, its configuration, it affects the entire universe in a different way than other planetary systems. Well, and so if you mess up, so if you interfere with this part of the universe, then you are affecting the entire universe in a different way. You see what I mean? And so it's different if what happened on this planet happened in a different galaxy, it would have been probably different. The repair or the recycling or whatever evolution course would have been different.
I had promised a listener, they asked me to tell my UFO experience live on this show, and I promised them I would. So at some point I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to do that. But there was a question I was going to ask you in the chat room, and it just slid away. Well, first let me ask you, are you willing to take phone calls if people want to call in?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So if anyone wants to call in, I'm posting that in the chat room right now, the phone number. You're welcome to call in at 603-967-4030, and I will join you to the call. Just hang in. Make sure your computer or whatever you're listening to the show is muted, and I will join you to the call and try not to interrupt our guest as we're going along here. Another question came up. In your opinion, is it at all possible to quantify evidence from people who claim they have experienced some form of consciousness communication with an outside intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, that's what I started explaining earlier. Everybody has communication. Everybody is communicating with, again, either their own higher consciousness or some ET or some angel. The problem is, are they aware of it? How much are they understanding? How much are they willing to accept that this is real? So this is kind of like there's a fine line and a gray area. Who are the people who are doing it consciously, and accepting the fact that this is real? So, you know what I mean? So, but everybody is. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Yeah. Well, I know there's something like the average person has something like 43 or 45,000 thoughts per day. And
Right.
some of them just randomly pop in. It makes you wonder where some of them come from sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So someone wanted to know in the chat room about synchronicity. Have you looked into that topic at all? And does it fit anywhere in what you're speaking about?
Yes, I mean, to me, the way this works is before you come in, before you commit to a human life, so to speak, you don't just jump in and figure it out as you go along. You usually have a plan, and so the plan usually includes other people, specific situations and events in your life. For example, meeting someone at a particular time, or doing something that will change your life, or things like that. So before you come in, because you have that stories, so to speak, written out, you make sure that those events are going to happen along the way. Because as you come in, you also acknowledge and know that once you are in human form, you may feel disconnected. You may not remember. It's part of collapsing your consciousness from a much bigger mass into a much smaller mass and fitting it in a human form. So this breaking down of consciousness is going to make you forget. And so to make sure you don't forget, you say, at least when I do meet this person, it's going to be so strong that I'm going to remember I'm supposed to be with them. When I meet this person who's going to offer me this job, it's going to be so strong that I'm going to make sure I'm going to choose this job and do this job or whatever. So these important events from the human perspective seem to be like synchronicity. It's like, oh, guess what? Do you believe this? I was just thinking about that. And when in fact, it's before coming in, to me anyway, those important points it's kind of like breadcrumbs, to make sure you stay on track. That's how you pre-create these events, and then when they do happen, they appear to be synchronicity.
Long before I ever had this show, long before I ever had my UFO sighting or anything, I met a friend. I'm still friends with her. And I'm talking about 15 plus years ago. She said to me, she goes, I feel like I don't belong here. And so I said, what exactly do you mean? She said, I feel like, and she started laughing. She goes, I feel like I'm from another planet or something, like, and I want to go home. She said
Right.
that.
Yeah.
What would you say? I mean, this is like a friend from years ago. And what would you say to someone that says that?
Yeah, it's very real. So part of them is that remembrance that they're not from here, because that channel, like I said, this umbilical cord between the human you and your original consciousness is still kind of open and clear. So for her, that channel is pretty real. And so she is kind of remembering that there's another her somewhere else, and that's the real her on that other planet. So to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this story I've told several times over since I've had this show, but I'm going to just say it briefly because it's something similar to what you said just a few minutes ago, and that is, I had a insurance broker at my house years ago, 20 years at least, and he said to me that he used to be involved with a part of the Air Force that were reviewing UFOs in Vietnam, and during the war. And so I asked him, if that's so and they're actually here, what are they doing? They said, we are a petri dish. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And that he said the closest theory of the governments is that we're a petri dish.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, not in everything, but there's definitely a part of that connection and that part of this communication. I mean, this kind of interaction with extraterrestrial and other non-human entities that have to do with genetic manipulation and genetic engineering. No question, but it's not the whole story. It's just one part of the non-human presence that's here doing that. Just like kind of on Earth, there's some people doing this kind of program and other people doing other programs. So I think the danger is when people start to kind of look at one thing that's happening and come to the conclusion that all of extraterrestrial, beings or, have to do with working with government and, making it like that's the only thing. And it's not, because that's probably maybe the most common, or that's what they need to understand for the time being anyway. But there's a much bigger picture. I mean, and even those extraterrestrials, I mean, they're not God. They didn't create all of reality. They can create some parts of physical reality, but something else created them. So there is a much bigger picture than everything else that's down here.
Right. So the other question up here, what correlation have you observed between the various accounts of unrelated experiencers who claim contact with ET? What conclusion do you draw from the fact that details of their stories seem to be in sync with each other?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we showed in the film. That was the idea, was to find people who did not know each other at all. And the way, actually, one of the techniques that I used in the film, it's intercutting, meaning, like their stories, it was crazy. We would interview somebody in Boston and they would tell us a story, and then we would fly to Arizona and that person would tell us the exact same story. Different age, different background, different sex, different cultural, impact. I mean, and so that's why in the film, like, we put them all almost one after the other, and they were finishing each other's sentences. So it's mind blowing. And what also was very interesting was the scientists also they did not know each other. You had a quantum biologist, and then you had an astrophysicist. So it's very different an electrical engineer. And they were also kind of using similar terminology and coming to similar conclusion. So it's pretty mind-boggling what's happening out there. I think, you start to wonder, like, this is real.
So do you think there's one theory of what I'm trying to remember what Einstein was looking for, the theory of everything?
Right.
Do you think that there is such a thing?
Yeah, I do. And that's what we were talking about in the film as well. Because by the time we explained how black holes and the magnetism and the fabric of space itself and the quantum waves and how they behave, by the time we kind of put it all together and connected the dots, we realized that, wait a minute, this explains physical space. It explains quantum space, meaning the space we don't see. This explains the mechanics within both spaces, meaning telepathic communication, teleportation, non-locality. It kind of like all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, we're now talking about consciousness. Is this the theory of consciousness? Isn't that more what we should be looking at as the theory of everything? So I definitely think there is such a thing, but it's not just the physical universe. We need to be talking about the quantum space, the quantum signature, and quantum reality as well.
So it seems to me this would lead into, and you probably talked about it in your film, but how does reincarnation fit into this whole thing?
Yeah. So So again, going back to where you start, let's say, to go back to this same example, you start out, let's say, at the Pleiades, and you say, you look down at the planet and planet Earth, and you say, I think I'm going to go down and help those little Earthlings down there. I'm going to be a human myself, and I think I'm going to, like I said, you have a story, you have a program, you have a plan, and that plan is to, let's say, raise human consciousness, maybe bring some cosmic spiritual teaching to that particular planet. So before you come in, it's like it's calculations. It's literally mathematics, but to simplify it, so you kind of think of the amount of consciousness you're going to need in a human body to create that whole story, to accomplish your goal. So from that original point of view, from that starting point, which is at the Pleiades, looking down at the Earth, you say, okay, I'm probably going to need about 10 to 15, at least, lifetimes. 10 to 15 lifetimes to accomplish this one goal. So from the beginning, you know that your consciousness is going to have to split up 10 to 15 times. So a part of you is going to come in at 3000 BC, another one is going to come in at 1000 BC, another one is going to come in, I don't know, in the year 10 AD or whatever. So you kind of already space it out so that you cover that amount of time to accomplish your goal. And so that's the reason why from the beginning, all of these lives are more like parallel lives, because they actually coexist. But as you go in and you take on the first body, meaning you come in the first human form 3,000 years ago, and you act out your human thing. Of course, not everything goes according to plan. You forget certain things. You kind of get involved with the wrong things for a while. So you are actually kind of messing up a little bit your reincarnation program. But you do have already a reincarnation plan in place before even coming here. You see what I mean? And so by the time you get to the third or the fourth lifetime, from the human perspective, looking back, it looks like it's a past life. But actually, from the beginning, from your original self, it's all parallel and instantaneous at the same time. Is that confusing enough?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I've never really bought the reincarnation thing. And I know every time I say that, not every time, but I've said that a few times, I do get email. There's a lot of people that really strongly believe in it. But, it's a UFO show. It's quite a bit off topic, but that's my fault for asking that question. So has there been any study from the information claimed to have been received by unique individuals, and has there been any parallels drawn from this data? I'm not sure exactly what that question's framed around exactly.
Has any information come from specific? Say that again?
Yeah, has there been any study from the information claimed to have been received by unique individuals, and has there been any parallels? I think he's talking about communication.
Right. So, you mean in the film or?
No, that you've experienced, I guess.
For me, you mean? So I can speak for myself, actually, and I've come in contact with different types of beings that is not so common. Most people talk about the Greys or the Reptilians or the Pleiadians or Arcturians and things like that. But the types of beings that I speak with and I've encountered other than these guys, because I've also seen in physical form some of the white, tall whites and some of the Nordics, like physically. But, interdimensionally, if you will, I've also come in contact with different types of beings that most people don't talk about. They're more like from another universe, and as they're more they have to do their work, or their consciousness is more about the management or the organization of an entire universe. So it's kind of on a much bigger scale, I want to say. So these are the types of beings that I've very much been in contact with throughout my life. Actually, there's different types of beings. Some of them are called life architects. Some of them are called, some may have heard of the Melchizedeks because of it's out there. But some of them are called universal teachers. And the life architects, I want to say, are very unique type beings that I don't think people have heard about. So these are the type of beings that I have come in contact with, and it's very specific. And that's how I understand the connection of the Earth with the universe, because of those types of communication.
I see. Leslie wants to know if your entities ever had physical forms.
Yeah, that's what I said. So usually when they come from very far away, their consciousness mass is so huge that they cannot take a physical form. It's kind of like they don't fit in a physical form, and they cannot survive in a physical form. Like they can't just manifest physically and then disappear. Those types of beings. Now there are others that I've seen in physical form. Like I said just a minute ago, I bumped into a tall white in Vegas, of all places, actually, physically. Another one was a Nordic, very much physical. So I did have those types of interactions as well.
Okay. This is another question in the chat room. Have you ever experienced or know of an orb communicating with a human through telepathy?
Yes, absolutely.
I've heard of this before too.
Yes, absolutely. So again, some of these orbs are actual beings, and some of them are not. So it depends. Like I said earlier, some of the beings that come from very far away, it's very difficult for them to take on a physical form. So they're going to look like an orb, just like an energy form, like an orb, but they're an actual being. So of course they communicate with you. Other orbs are not beings themselves, but there are kind of like it's like a consciousness space. It's kind of like a hub of information. So it depends the type of orbs that you are connecting with. Either way, you can receive communication.
I had someone that was on this show that took a report from an elderly woman who said that she saw an orange, hold on to your seat on this one. She saw an orange orb land in a field, and out of it came a Bigfoot.
Okay.
So that one was way out there. But let's see, another person in the chat room. Do any of these entities embody negative energy?
Of course. I mean, there's all kinds of beings out there. Sometimes, unfortunately, because I do a lot of healing work as well. I mean, part of the consciousness work that I've done for many, many years is also helping with clearing the energy so you can expand your consciousness and reconnect and stuff like that. So during this work, because, like I said, because I could perceive the subtle energy, I would see all sorts of beings floating around the person. And so that entity was definitely very negative. A lot of them were just floating in their energy field. Some of them were literally attached to the being, in other words, inside the body of the person. And I had to kind of detach them. And so sometimes it's specifically negative, like they are on purpose, kind of leading you in a negative way. But others are kind of coming into your energy to have an experience, a human experience or something like that. It doesn't mean that it's good or it's better. You're not supposed to be doing that. But I'm just saying, like, there's a difference. And others are literally dark, dark energies. These dark energies, you're going to see them mostly with folks who drink a lot, who do a lot of drugs. And the reason being, you lose control, like your own energy space is open, is kind of collapsed, and you have no control, because when you take drugs or you drink, you think, and your consciousness is not in control of your being. So this is when you're going to have a negative entity come in.
Wow. Yeah, I've known a few people that they seem to have like a negative cloud around them, you know?
Yeah.
What do they call them? Energy vampires or something.
Oh, definitely. I call them attachment. They're attachments. And usually they attach to the spine of the person, and they can cause all sorts of problems. Also, of course, illnesses and mental illness. Because speaking of thoughts, you mentioned earlier, there's all these thoughts that are jumping in your head. Well, you're drinking, and all of a sudden you're kind of, hearing voices. And then you're saying, am I hearing? Is that me? Am I making this up? And so now you're like, you're adding to your confusion. Well, actually, you are hearing voices, because it's another entity that's there speaking to you. And if you continue having these experiences and confusing yourself, that's how schizophrenia happens, because you are hearing things, and others are telling you there's nobody there. And actually there are other entities just attached to you, speaking to you. So it's very much real. And that's how you become schizophrenic, unfortunately. A lot of mental illness has to do with entities.
Wow. So Jade in the chat room has an interesting question for you. Has there been one scientific fact about our galaxy or universe that we've yet to discover that your aliens have told you, which is now testable through observation?
Well, that's what so after this film, I kind of bonded with all these scientists. And so we continued to work together and, on other topics. So I've been actually communicating and working with Dr. Shield at Harvard, the astrophysicist that I mentioned earlier. And that's exactly what we are working on. We are, so we kind of like bring this information of how the black holes are actually formed, meaning even before, is there a Big Bang? Is there's no Big Bang? So we're actually finding out a lot of the things that we are told in a direct manner that later Dr. Shield is able to say, well, we were able to measure this, or we came to that conclusion. One of the things, hold on. No, this has not been demonstrated yet. Let me try to think of the one that has been demonstrated. Well, I mean, I have been sharing this with Dr. Shield only since the film, so it's only been 6 months, so I don't know about what revelation. But I can tell you of other examples. For example, one that's probably the most known is way back, probably about 15 years ago. In fact, I wrote about it in my books. I saw that these cosmic webs, those grids that are around each planet, have, like I said earlier, a particular geometric shape. And on the North Pole, if you looked at it from the North Pole, you would see like a hexagon. And so that's because of the way this planet, the grid is kind of the way it's aligned. It's a grid within a grid within a grid. But from that perspective, and so I saw that brought the information that every planet has that hexagon. And so I wrote that in my books, and I was telling people in the class and things like that. And then later, I think more recently, and I want to say about 7 years ago, I'm not sure, you can look it up, but the NASA's Cassini mission photographed the hexagon at the North Pole of Saturn, which I had already kind of known about and talked about. So these are the types of things. And also the number of planets within the planetary system. So these are the types of things that I bring from those types of beings, universal beings, information that later gets verified by NASA or some other scientists. But we're going to be doing more of this science and actually putting it out there on the website. And on my, I have a foundation as well, also that's very much for that purpose. So we're going to be putting a lot of this information out as well.
Great. Okay. Well, I did promise a listener that I'd tell the story about my sighting. So real quickly, I'll do the quick version of it. This is someone that recently started listening to the show and started supporting the show. So thank you for that. So anyway, and this really has nothing to do with talking to you. So I'll try to make it quick.
That's okay.
So I think it was 2006. It was around 8 o'clock. I was in a hot tub. I had just had surgery a few weeks before, sitting in a hot tub in Carmel Valley in a friend's ranch they had. So they said I could use their ranch for a few days. So went down there. I was not drinking. I was not on medication. I had weaned myself off of pain medication. And I was just relaxing in the hot tub. I love to look up at the stars. And all of a sudden, it was no stars actually at that time, but it was sort of like dusk a little later than that, somewhere around 8 o'clock or something. And all of a sudden, a perfectly shaped disc just like flew right over my head. And the thing that impressed me the most about any of it was there was absolutely no sound at all. I mean, that's the thing that stuck in my memory the most. It sort of had like a bluish gray glow. Again, it was just like the old-fashioned flying saucer, and it moved in a straight line and it stopped. And then it moved in an angle toward Monterey. So I got out of the hot tub. I went in and I didn't know what to do. I had no idea there was any online reporting or anything like that. So I called the police department of Monterey, and I said, has anyone else, I just want to know, has anyone else reported seeing a UFO? And the woman treated me very sarcastically. She put me on hold for about 20 minutes. I finally hung up. I brought it up to someone I worked with. I was working at an auction gallery with about 25 or 30 people. And I had a friend there, and I said, please don't tell anyone, but I have to tell you this story. Well, next thing you know, everyone there was ridiculing me, talking about,
of course,
space aliens and all that. So that's my story. So I fulfilled my promise.
Well, one thing that you brought up is the way the UFO was behaving. It came out from somewhere. It moved in one straight line, and then it stopped, and then it moved in a different direction. So we talked about that in the film, again, how those intersection points, those black holes within the fabric of space is what allows the UFO to do that. So this is one of the theories that's in the film as well. So that makes a lot of sense, what you're saying.
Wow. Yeah. It really did, it changed my way of thinking about things. I had, a brief interest in the topic when I was young, but it really just changed like everything. It was like, I never thought of taking a picture. I don't think I had my phone on me anyway, but there was never any thoughts, but it was like, oh my God, it really happens. So another question, have you come across cases where a group encounter abduction took place between people that did not previously know each other, and then later those people meet in some random way? That was by Bill.
Actually, in the film, I didn't come across that. I mean, in the film, we interviewed two different people, actually, who said the same thing. That they said that they were on a ship somewhere, and then later on, they met someone in a grocery store or something like that. And then that person told them, I know you were on that ship. So I was told that story. I didn't see it myself in that way. And so that was one person we interviewed. And then another person we interviewed, like in a completely different location, told me the same thing happened to her. So it's pretty amazing.
How would you possibly break the ice with someone and say,
yeah, right.
I think I saw you on a ship?
Yeah, exactly. At a grocery store.
yeah, that would be hard to do.
Yeah.
So are you planning on making more films or, similar or?
Yeah. So because of what happened and because the scientists got so excited, so, that really encouraged me to continue. And also the film, we've already won like 6 festival awards and, we're nominated for 4 different awards and stuff. So, and that was also very exciting for me because those festivals, are run by film people. They're not UFO people. So they don't really, they have no prejudice. They are not into that topic, and so they're judging the film as a good film, well done or not. Is it credible? Does it hold? Is it well presented? So on and so forth. And so because there is so much recognition, that tells me that even mainstream film folks who are creating films for the mainstream are getting it. I was kind of shocked in a way. And so because of that and because of what happened with the scientists, I definitely feel we are onto something really good. And I did this film as a pilot, actually, thinking that it would be a series. So
Really?
now I'm
Wow.
actually... Yeah, so because of the recognition and the quick turnaround, actually, I'm planning the next film, and it's called The Science of Superhuman, and it's going to be more specific now about, how the brain works in terms of bringing information, tapping into information. This first film that we've been talking about is the bigger picture. It's the mechanics of everything all together, contact in general. But this next film is more specific. What does the brain have to do to tap into these other dimensions? What are dimensions? Where are the dimensions? Is this dimension better than that dimension? How do I know? You know what I mean? How do I know that I'm tapping here and I'm not going there? So it's very kind of bringing science as well behind how the human brain functions within this bigger consciousness. It's fascinating. We're also wanting to talk about the different types of beings, why certain people are specifically attracted to Arcturians, why others Pleiadians. Why is it that specific? So we're finding a lot of that sort of specificity, and then we're trying to figure out what is it is it because your brain is done differently, or because it has to do with your lineage? So it's really, really fascinating, and we are also bringing a lot of how the physics of sound actually works. In the downloading and how the interpretation of non-visible energy into a language that you comprehend. Basically, just the specifics of how it works to receive this information from somewhere into this human brain. So that's the next film.
Wow, interesting. So what do you think about, for instance, SETI looking for signals from space? Do you think they're looking in the wrong way?
We actually interviewed the director of SETI, but
Seth
it's
Shostak?
kind of, yeah, we had him in the show. We didn't use his interview eventually, but because we wanted also to bring in everything that's out there. And, honestly, it just kind of doesn't make sense when they explain to me exactly how they operate. They have a bunch of those radars or whatever, kind of trying to find some sort of signal in space and measure any sort of consistency in the signal and deciphering the signal. It's just so random and so kind of open-ended without, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me at all. honestly. And especially that, I mean, seriously, like, it doesn't even make sense that extraterrestrial intelligence is going to be sending a radio signal. I mean, like, of course, information itself is not the radio. It's using the radio frequency. That's why they're calling it radio signal. But actually, it's photon of light. It's light that is the information within the radio wave frequency. So, but really, I mean, is this the kind of, it just seems so narrow and small compared with what's possible in terms of communication.
I've had that conversation with Seth Shostak, and he basically says, well, we're doing what we think it might be. Do you have a better idea? Or something like that, he said.
Yeah. And he's adorable. I really like him.
Oh, yeah,
he's very
funny.
well spoken. He's great. Yeah. I really enjoyed speaking with him. It's just the whole concept doesn't make sense to me, especially that, like I said, for me as a direct experience, I understand the mechanics of receiving information from any point in the universe instantaneously. So the radio signal things, like, really, so anyway.
Yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
They are going to be searching, I think, in different, I forget what he told me, but they are, as technology improves, they're going to be looking in different ways as well, sort of in different spectrums or something.
Okay.
Right now, there's quite a few frequencies they're looking for, but I do understand, and I semi-agree with you that it's I don't want to say useless, but if they happen to stumble on something, great, because right now, everyone, I don't want to say is totally closed-minded, but there's a lot of people that just think it's impossible that they just think we're alone. And I don't personally think we're alone, but that's my own personal thoughts.
Yeah, but now even scientists say we're not alone. I mean, like, it's not even mathematically possible to be alone. I mean, so I think we're past that, but now the proof or whatever, I think that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to ever get any type of government disclosure. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it'll happen in another way if it happens.
I think so too.
So why do you think, if we are being visited by beings or we are being visited by UFOs, why do you think they're elusive and that we can't actually, nail one down for evidence, let's say?
Yeah, for several reasons. First of all, some individuals say, well, why can't I meet one? So I want to respond to that question because a lot of people think that way too. And this I know because just from teaching and, facilitating for so many years, I know that I have a lot of students who say, well, why can't I see this or whatever? So when I try to help them to see where the block is, I realize that they're saying they want to see this entity or have this experience. And as they're saying it, there's this huge block of fear. And so people don't realize that consciously they want the experience, but unconsciously they're terrified. So that's not how it works. The law of attraction is not just by you saying it, it's by you really being it, meaning it, and your intent has to be aligned with what you're saying. So that's one of the reasons why most people have the experience, especially as children, but they block it off, they push it to the side, they forget about it out of fear. In addition to that, then you have the parents and everybody else who tells you you're crazy, so that doesn't help. So that's what happens on an individual level. But on a bigger level, like, for example, so why don't they just show up and, somewhere in front of everyone? I think there's several things that are going on here. One has to do with agreements. I mean, it's kind of like what happens is like you don't show up at your neighbor's house without being announced or without, it's like there are universal laws that there are bigger agreements that are at place. And so what happens is that the configuration of the earth is very narrow, it's very small. And so the agreement is that the species that occupy, meaning humans, the species that occupies this planet need to kind of have a certain level of understanding of that law so that this communication starts to happen openly. And it's not there yet. So how should I explain this? It's like, it's kind of like it's a breach of contract. It's a breach of agreement that you don't fly over a non-fly zone. You know what I mean? And so because humans are not capable of communicating, they're not there yet as a global consciousness. That's the reason why globally a UFO is not going to show up and a bunch of people are going to step out. It's not going to be that sort of revelation, not now anyway. Well, so there's several things going on. Plus, there's all the secrecy stuff going on with the government. So there's like at different levels, the individual being fearful, the bigger picture. You know, there's all sorts of things at play here.
We only have about 3 minutes left.
Oh.
I know. So, and someone brought up a really good point in the chat room, and that is we're very violent. So why would they want to show us?
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. The consciousness, the global consciousness is not there yet. They're not at a place of understanding of being a cosmic citizenship. So what you know globally, the collective is if you see something you don't know, you shoot at it. So that's the reason why, like, it's the level of the collective is not there yet. That's the reason why it would be a breach. It's kind of like having a child in a closed off room, you know. If you open the door suddenly, you show up, it's possible that he's going to freak out and, you know, jump at you or whatever, or you know. So I think that's what happens. So you have to kind of prepare the child to this interaction. But it's bigger than that. It's more about a global understanding and agreements, actually, that have to do on a galactic level. And that's the reason why.
I had, and this is kind of a closing statement, I had a astrophysicist on this show a while back, and he said that he and his fellows at NASA quietly agreed that if any intelligence advances technologically, they get to a bottleneck, and if they can get through that bottleneck without destroying themselves, they'll travel the stars. And I thought that was pretty good. But thank you so much. Can you once again give your website out, if you would?
Yes, please. So it is et-contact.com. So that's the website for the film, and it's coming out in just a few days. So people want to go October 10th. If they want to go, click on watch the film, and they'll see where it's going to be available. And if people are interested in the consciousness work, they can go to my other website, which is omniumuniverse.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thanks so much for having me. You're awesome.
All right. You take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. All right, everyone. So that's it for the show. Thank you for either being a supporter or hanging in on YouTube tonight. And we are also playing on a couple of different radio shows. And I'll talk about that next week. There may be a change, not in this show, but my other show that I do. So anyway, next week we have my good friend Lee Spiegel on. I know he was only on back in April, but he's coming on back again. He's always a pleasure to have on, a lot of fun. So thanks so much, everyone, and we'll be back next week. As always, keep your eyes to the sky.